Welcome to Books and Brews Light, number 63 with Bill Kilpack.
I write under WD.
Okay, perfect. So welcome WD Kilpack, episode number 63. So I would like you to start just by giving a brief introduction of yourself and your writing.
Well, I write sci-fi and fantasy. The epic fantasy series that I have out right now is called The New Blood Saga. It's 8 books, 5 of which are out. One reviewer described it as Tolkien, Game of Thrones, and Wheel of Time had a baby.
All 3 of them together.
Yeah, and I thought that was pretty cool for about 20 seconds. And then I was like, oh, crap, because no pressure there.
Right, right.
I also write sci-fi. I have a this is book 1, Crown Prince, and then I have Paleface is a modern sci-fi novel that is in it's in movie development. And
Congratulations.
oh, thanks. That's mind-blowing.
Is this your first book that has gone into movie production?
Yes. And,
okay. And how did that come about? Did you solicit agents or know the right people or the right person read it?
Nobody believes me when I tell them. LinkedIn.
Really?
Yeah, there's a guy who's president of a production company, and he had a sci-fi series that he needed a writer, and he had an idea, and so he had gone through a couple writing teams, and they didn't get it, and so the person that was the second with the second group told him, you need to get somebody who lives and breathes sci-fi. And so he found me on LinkedIn and sent me a message that said something to the effect of, I'd like to have a conversation with you. Can you call me tomorrow at this time with a phone number?
Wow.
Yeah. And I looked him up, like, what is this? And he did a bunch of acting in the 80s, and he was always like the other cop or the other gangster and stuff like that. So my wife and I recognized him and went, oh, well, that's that guy. And so I thought, well, I have nothing to lose. And I called him, and he made me sign all kinds of, and the most serious NDA I've ever seen. And then he talked to me about it and sent me about 40 emails with all these little ideas that he had emailed himself for graphics or whatever, that were all these and kind of encapsulated these ideas. And I assembled it like a puzzle. And then he gave me 6 weeks to write a pilot. And
wow.
9 days later, I sent him a first draft, and he called me back crying. And because I got it, and he told me there was stuff in there that was in his mind, but he never told me. And how did I do that? And I was like, it made sense.
That's an amazing story. And I have to ask you, only somewhat tongue-in-cheek, when you first saw this, Call Me, was your first thought, yet another person wanting money from me?
Absolutely.
Okay, because I am absolutely inundated on LinkedIn, on various of my Facebook pages, on X. It's, I always say to my husband, I feel like, do you remember the airplane movies? And the guy throwing the Hare Krishnas off him as he tries to get through the airport. That's what I feel like on LinkedIn, like, get away, all these people just coming at me. So, I mean, in a way, it's a stroke of luck that you looked twice and gave it a shot.
Well, absolutely. I get 10 to 20 between email and messaging through social media. I get 10 to 20 messages like that a day.
Yeah.
And then I get phone calls.
Oh, no. How
And
are they getting your phone number?
because when I first started, my phone number was on one of my websites. Um, you
Okay.
know, I did a lot of work with nonprofits, and so
Mhm.
I now have my phone numbers taken off of those sites. Uh,
Right. Okay.
but I learned my lesson. Unfortunately, now my phone
Yeah.
number is in circulation, and I can't change it because of
Right.
I'm still involved in things.
Right. Now, you do script writing too. Am I remembering right that
Mhm.
you have your own script writing company?
Well, not a company, but yeah, I do screenwriting. Yeah,
Okay.
when I so going back to this deal with writing this series, I wrote 24 episodes, and uh, going through and trying to get funding, uh, we we came to the conclusion that it was going to be very expensive, and this being
Mhm.
an indie production company, they said, we need to do something that is smaller, because a lot of we realized that we were getting the same objections, and it was all about, well, show me some of the stuff that you've done, and it was a new company. And so they said, well, and so he just asked me, do you have something else that's not a series, that would be a standalone, that would be that wouldn't be big budget? And I said, well, I have this novella called Paleface. And I told him about it, and he said, that's it. And then he read it, and he says, this is it. This is what we want to do.
Mhm.
And so, uh, because it's like that. And I wrote it for a contest that had a word limit. And, uh, well, I don't do word limits. So,
I wish I had my book handy to hold up. I also don't do word limits. It's good exercise, though.
oh,
I
yeah.
think doing things like that really help us to become better writers.
Well, I cut all kinds of stuff from this to make it eligible for L. Ron Hubbard's Writers of the Future.
Mhm.
And it's one of the hardest things I've ever done.
Yeah.
But writing the screenplay, because I'm writing the screenplay for it, all the stuff I cut, it's going back in.
So is this going to be the one movie that has more than the book does?
Um, well, I'm sure I'll do a novelization
Okay.
after, but yeah, it's going to have
Okay.
stuff. I mean, there's a lot of movies that have more than the book, that people think that they're taking liberties, which a lot of times they are. But
Hmm.
one of my favorite movies is Blade Runner, but
Okay.
I'm not crazy about the book. There's only one scene from the book that's in the movie, and
Really?
yeah, the Voight-Kampff test that you see at the beginning is the
Okay.
only scene that's in the book.
Okay. I think it's been a long, long, long time since I've seen Blade Runner, and I'm pretty sure I'm thinking of the correct movie, which just the only way I could accept some of it was to say the whole point is that it's a very dystopian
Mhm.
future, and that's the whole point. But there were some hard things about that movie, and I don't think that I've read the book. So, um, before we jump into your book, I wanted to talk about some of the interesting parts of your life. You have 10 children.
Yep, yep. There's yeah, I've got 5 kids, and 3 stepkids, and I don't know what to call them, 2X stepkids. But
Okay.
yeah,
Well, I found that interesting because I think you are the very first person I've talked to who has as big a family as mine. So, and my husband is kind of in your position that he has a daughter and 9 stepchildren. So he's got more stepchildren than you do. But what is people's reaction to that?
well, since I live in Utah, people don't really react to it.
Okay, okay, so
But
it's sort of normal there.
but I coached wrestling for 25 years, and when I would travel out of state, then the general reaction was, wow, and looking at me like, how did that happen? Or something like that.
And you're like, do I really need to explain that to you? My husband has a colleague who has 14 children. And so he used to get a kick out of it when they're on Zoom meetings with some of the other team members. And he says, Pat and I, between us, have 24 children. And people's jaws do drop and hit the floor. And then my husband comes down and he says to me, we got to adopt 4 kids and catch up to him. So that hasn't happened yet because now I'm too busy taking care of the sheep and the rabbits. So, and I was interested too that you coached wrestling. Now, 3 of my boys, I have 7 boys, and I believe it was 3 of them did wrestling in high school. I've never really known, or at least I've forgotten if I ever knew, what is the difference between wrestling and Greco-Roman wrestling?
Well, freestyle and Greco-Roman are the international styles. The United States is the only country in the world that does folk style, which is what's done in high school and college here.
Okay.
And
Okay.
so, and that's part of why we tend not to do as well in the Olympics, is because the things that are emphasized in folk style tend to not make you do as well in freestyle and Greco. That
Okay.
freestyle and Greco emphasize being aggressive and taking chances. Folk style emphasizes being under control and not taking chances.
Interesting.
And so
Okay.
Greco-Roman, there's no contact below the waist. So it's all throws. And it's literally about being, since your hips are in, then you will be in the same kind of position as your opponent. And it's literally about being first. If you go in, as soon as you feel it, you hit it. And I did it so much that I still have kind of muscle memory that my wife knows that like if we're slow dancing, she can't go over and under on me because I twitch. I have a throw twitch and it's still there.
And you're about to throw her down, huh?
Yeah, and I just tell her, you got to go both up or both down, or I'm going to toss you. And but it's just, if she, and especially if she like steps in with an over and under, I try, you know, and it's just funny that these things that just never go away. But that's what it was. If it was an over and under and they stepped in, then I would throw. And that was one of those things that, you know, that it well, it was why I was as successful as I was. You know, I at the peak of my career, I was ranked number 4 in the world.
Oh, congratulations.
Thanks.
Do you happen to know Jim Martinez or know who he is?
I probably do. The problem is I'm the worst person I know at names.
Okay. Well,
so if I saw him, I would probably know.
Okay. I'm just wondering if you cross paths, especially being that high up. He took the bronze medal in Greco-Roman wrestling in the 1984 Olympics. And I'm not huge into sports. I'm not huge into Olympics, but I happened to go to school with the youngest of his brothers. There were 6 brothers, all big into sports. And so it was kind of neat. I graduated a few years after he got the bronze. And so we played the Olympic fanfare for band. He got dressed up in his Olympic, you know, suit and walked across the stage with his bronze medal, and everyone cheered. And this was all well planned out in the thoughts. And then he kind of stood there, looked at the band director and was like, what am I supposed to do now? So, but it was a fun memory. And then their mother actually ended up driving the school bus for my kids. So it was just kind of funny. And that's how I happen to know that Greco-Roman wrestling even exists. But
given that context, then I'm sure that I have met him. That group was in, there's not really a compound for wrestling in the United States that, like in gymnastics. But as close as there was to one, I was in it. And I was in the group that was after that group. And so I was in the group that they were kind of grooming to be after that group there in the 84 and 88 Olympics.
Okay.
And so So yeah, I'm sure that I met him. But like I said, I'm horrible at names, and I'm that guy that somebody comes up says, "Hey, Bill," and I'm like, "Hey, you," you know,
Right.
and it's horrible because like if it was one of my students, from teaching college, I bet I could tell them what they did a speech about,
Right, but not
but
their
I
name.
can't remember their name.
That's interesting how memories work. So you have a very, very long list of awards. Your books have won. How many books do you have, by the way?
I have 8.
Oh,
And
you've only written 8 books?
yeah,
And
and
you've got like 70 awards?
well, 50, but yeah,
Okay.
um, I I like to win.
I was sort of thinking as we talked about wrestling and how accomplished you are, yes, you are driven to win. But one of the things I was curious about when I read that long list of awards is that when I first started putting out my books, I entered the first one in 1 or 2 awards. And I very quickly decided this is very time consuming and very expensive. Have you found, are there always entry fees, or are you finding contests that don't have those?
There's not always entry fees, but the ones with entry fees, it narrows the pool.
Okay.
Um, but there's not always entry fees. And there are some that, plain and simple, when I first started, I avoided just because I saw some of the people that won it, and I was like, oh, I'll wait,
Mhm. Mhm.
but
And are
now
you
it's like,
entering those now that you
yeah,
have this? Okay.
and
It's very impressive.
I've been amazed that I started out with my poetry and years ago, and I won some awards there, but I started with my poetry. This will not sound right, but I started with my poetry because I thought it was my worst stuff. And I
Really?
wanted to have something to look forward to. And that
Mhm.
makes really not a lot of sense, but that's what I did. And percentage wise, with my books, the percentage that I have won is you can't even compare what my poetry percentage versus my books, and which is good because I do think my books are a lot better. But the poetry background is why I like my fantasy. There's songs in there, which is why I think is why
Mhm.
I compare it to Tolkien. There's songs
Mhm.
and that sort of thing that so which I do enjoy. I do really like that.
Right.
But
Yeah.
I
Do
was
you
raised.
So, of course, because this is Books and Brews, do you make up whole worlds of what they eat and drink and, in addition to the songs? So what would be a drink that they would have?
Well, I I may not make it. I do all the cooking in our house,
Okay.
and so I love to cook, and there's always uh, stuff about food, and that's some of the harder stuff to write. How
Really?
do you
Why do you
describe
say that?
because how do you describe how something tastes?
Mhm.
And that's, to me, is really hard. Um, Describing how something feels, like when somebody gets hurt, because of all the years I spent in wrestling and football and all these things, I've injured just about anything you can name,
Mhm.
and so that's easy for me. And
Okay.
where people always, I've had a lot of authors say, well, that's their hard part. Well, not for me because I've done it and I know what it feels like.
Right.
But I'm at the in next month. I'm on a panel that's all about that.
All
With
about writing pain or
describing
sensations.
injuries, and
Okay. Okay.
so, but
That sounds like a fascinating panel. I have a book that somewhere up in my library along those lines where it takes all these scenarios that we might not have personal experience and gives you all these sensations and adverbs and
mhm.
ideas about how to write them. And that would be perfect in that book. I'm kind of curious with describing a taste: salty, bitter, sweet, smooth, rough, grainy. What
I
what
try to
do
give it. I
you
try to give it more than that.
Okay.
And so, like, if you, for example, I have a smoker, I smoke a lot of meats. And so, one of the things that, if it is what I always double smoke because I like it. And
Hmm.
so, one of the things when you get something that is like the bark, when I take a bite, I get hit with the salt, but then it also, there's something that kind of rolls through my sinuses.
Oh, interesting.
And so
Okay.
I describe that. And that's one of the, and so things
Hmm.
like that, that you don't just taste it, you experience it. And
Hmm.
so those types of things are, I'm looking for that. I want more than just it was salty, or I could taste the
Okay.
rosemary, or I'm always looking for something that's a little bit more. And
Right.
and I people describe, when people talk about my writing, they talk about how, they could see, hear, smell, taste, feel the
Right.
stuff that I'm describing.
Yeah.
And that my stuff is immersive and those types of things. And that is, that's deliberate. That's what I
And I
want.
think that's, yeah, I think that's great advice for aspiring writers to really look for new ways
Mhm.
beyond, some of the obvious. So I'm going to have to take that to heart next time I write food. So I write a lot of medieval foods. So
Yeah.
things that I haven't necessarily tasted, although I've done the research, I've actually made a number of medieval recipes. And the fact is, in a lot of ways, nothing new is under the sun. They ate a lot of the same things we do. And the things they ate that were different are things I don't think I can legally do here, like a dolphin. So anyway, I could go on about that. It's a fascinating subject. Do you have a reading ready?
Yeah, I do.
Go ahead.
Well, this is from Crown Prince, and it is it's toward the beginning, where Nathar, the main character, he's the guardian of Merrick, and he is uh, the city of Erig, the capital of Merrick, is um, being it's been under siege. The queen of Merrick has had a child and died in childbirth, and so he knew that was going to happen. As the guardian, he can see into the future. He can see into the past. He knew this was going to happen. He knew that uh, that the overthrow of the royal family could not be stopped. So he and his father before him have spent decades preparing.
Okay.
So he is there with the baby and a wet nurse fleeing because the enemy is surging into the city, into the palace, and that's where we're at. And he has just been confronted by the new captain of the guard of the defending forces, which is someone that he personally trained and knows very well.
Okay.
You, Niels gasped, incredulous, his voice breaking. Anyone but you. Your disappointment will not last long. Nathar struck, sword starting high, then altering course to slash almost straight down. Each motion mechanical, automatic from years of training. Niels made to parry the high stroke, then followed the downstroke, partially blocking it. Nathar's point sliced through the edge of the captain's thigh, pushing down the metal plate that had been intended to protect it, spilling bright red on the hardwood floor. The captain's eyes widened as his legs sagged, no longer able to support his weight. Nathar's sword whipped back up, then stabbed straight toward the other's throat, efficient as a striking adder. Niels twisted at the shoulders and snatched at the blade with his free hand while he fell, his leg buckling under him. His grip on Nathar's sword blade held, his arm trembling while his skin paled. Red ran in a thick rivulet from his hand down the blade gutters on either side of the blade. Why? Niels scarcely whispered, staring up at Nathar. A tendril of bloody blonde hair peeled away from his brow and fell away. Gods have mercy on you, Guardian. Your sight is true. I hope you've read it rightly. Nathar did not so much as blink as he yanked back on his sword, and two of the blonde man's fingers fell to the floor, blood spurting into the air. At the same moment, Niels lunged forward, yelling, Belaine. Nathar twisted at the waist. evading the stab meant for his heart, and sunk his own sword point into the side of the captain's neck. There was a pained cry, a woman's voice, from behind him. Niels toppled toward the ground, sword clanging as his dead fingers released it. The fresh corpse's weight pulled at the guardian's sword until he lifted the pommel and the body thumped heavily on the hardwood. Nathar lifted his newly bloodied blade, face neutral. Then he blinked, cold expression melting away as he turned. Darshell was there, back bowed forward and arms clenched protectively over the baby. A wide slash across her back ran from one shoulder blade to the other. Red already rolled down from the cut in thick rivulets, brightly soaking her white shirt. Had she not turned to the side to cover the baby with her body, she and Vakari both probably would have been run through. Nathar, she said, voice weak, and stumbled forward a step. Nathar? Voices rose around them. He was not sure if all had gone silent to watch the guardian of Merrick fight the captain of the guard to the death, or if he simply had not heard them when enveloped in the melee. Demons of chaos, he roared, catching her elbow and dragging her forward. Stupid woman. I told you to go. I tried. You did not try, he yelled, kicking the door to the kitchen so hard it came free of its hinges. Then he understood. 2 bearded men were there with bloodied axes. 2 of Lane's soldiers were there as well, on their knees. Their bowed heads rose as Nathar entered and the axemen lifted their weapons. Lord Nathar, the 2 men gasped, seeing the blood on his sword. The relief in their voices was a physical blow. I tried, Darshell repeated, but her voice was weak. Nathar glanced at her. Her skin, normally dusky to the point of being the color of copper, was much more pale. His emerald gaze returned to the men he had surprised. The axemen were afraid, both stepping backward. Verlaine's men were smiling, despite blood soaking one's sleeve and smearing half the other's face. Nathar crossed the kitchen in 2 steps, dragging Darshell with him, threw open the door to the cellar, and was through. He bolted the door and headed down the stairs before anyone even raised a cry of alarm. He wanted to take the steps 2 or 3 at a time, but Darshell was fighting him, both because she could not see and because she was weakening. He could tell by the way her resistance declined with each step. You killed him. Her, them both, she finally managed, then lost her footing. She screamed, but Nathar kept her on her feet with his free hand. As if in response, he heard a cry of pain above and a wild voice crying, Nathar!
Very nice. One of the comments I read somewhere on your site was that your books are praised as people living real lives, even though it's fantasy. I'm not a huge reader of fantasy, not because I dislike it mainly. As I said, I'm busy taking care of sheep and marketing and writing and all the other things. But is this not typical of fantasy? Does it tend to be more about the battles and things and the adventure than daily life?
Well, they tend to be more, they tend to be less grounded in reality. I describe my style as realistic fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
They have real lives, they have real jobs. I do research into what jobs they might have had. I do research into those types of things. And the magic in the New Blood Saga is much more subtle. It's not like in Harry Potter where you've got fireworks going off.
Okay.
And
what would be an example?
Well, for one thing, the word magic is never said once.
Okay.
And so there's a spot where they are they're basically teleported someplace, and they the people that do it draw some symbols in the dirt, and all of a sudden they just look up and realize that they're in this other place where these symbols were where these other symbols were already drawn in the dirt.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. They didn't feel anything. They just looked up and went, whoa. And they're someplace
And they
else.
don't know what happened to themselves.
And they just realized that that it had happened.
Okay.
And so it's much more subtle that way.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in other stuff than something like that might have had, this brilliant flash of light, swirling purple,
Yeah.
A wave of dust flying out from them in an expanding circle, things like that.
Or flashy. It reminded me of I believe his name is Bill McCormick, and he writes Fantasy and Sci-fi. Boy, I am drinking water, by the way, nothing else. I can speak. He writes fantasy and sci-fi, and that really jumped out to me about his books, that they open with this very domestic scene of a husband and wife, and you hardly even realize until later that they're actually these chimeras, because they're just living this ordinary life of sitting around the hearth, having dinner, talking about, she says, you never talk about the wars. And it's a very domestic scene that, like I said, I don't read a lot of fantasy, but it seemed to really jump out as not the norm for that. So I was struck that people are saying that about your work too. So you might really like his work and he might really like yours. But another thing that jumped out at me was distortion and exaggeration to make the human condition more apparent. That, I believe you said that of sci-fi and fantasy. How does reading, or why does reading help us see the human condition, and why does it matter that we get that from books?
Well, that's the tool that's the primary tool in sci-fi and in fantasy, is that use of distortion, that use of exaggeration. And that's why they tend to be grouped together, is because they both use it. In fantasy, then that distortion is usually thanks to magic. In sci-fi, it's usually thanks to technology. And I don't like that they're grouped together, but they are. And so, but that use of distortion just makes it easier. And so, like, for example, in Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, then having that distortion with the monster makes it so that that distortion, that huge contradiction in the monster, that he is this horrible thing, but then he is so innocent and so caring, that contradiction, that distortion of him physically and all of that goes along with that, makes it so that innocence is that much more poignant. And so that tool is just integral in fantasy and science fiction. And so that, people ask me all the time about what is science fiction, what is fantasy, and that's my answer, is that they use that tool, because that, to me, I think is one thing that does define it. There's more than that, of course, but I think that's essential.
And I think that's great insight, that probably most people would say fantasy is sort of a medieval-esque world with dragons and magic, and sci-fi is, the future and technology. So I find that a very interesting insight, that they share that particular element. And I think we're living in a world where people are not really looking at human nature and being as introspective as maybe we might need to be, which raised the question to me when I read that comment. I think people are reading a whole lot less these days. Does that seem accurate to you?
Well, I think that people, yes, I think that people are reading less. I think that, but I think that I think it's not as bad as some people say,
I
because
hope that you are correct.
I think that some of the people that are not reading, then they're not taking into consideration audiobooks.
Hmm.
I um I have not done my audiobooks yet. I'm working on it.
Me too.
But I have so many people when I go to events that ask me, is it on audiobook yet? I don't have time to read anymore. Or with
Yep.
my job, I listen to my books while I'm working because I don't have time to read anymore. I
Right.
think that a lot of the people that, on these surveys or whatever they're doing, that they get these statistics, they only ask, do you still read? They don't ask, what do you do as an
Right.
alternative? And
Hmm.
so I was very alarmed at one point about people not reading also, that, as a writer, and, I managed one of the locations of the biggest, what was at that time the biggest chain of bookstores and malls when I was getting my master's degree. And, and they were talking about this decline, but, and that's when audiobooks were first starting to come out. But
Okay.
I think that I think a lot of that shift is going there to audio.
Hmm.
And so I think it's not as bad as people think. And so, I read all my books to my wife. She calls
Okay.
it, her bedtime stories.
Uh-huh.
And another comment that I get a lot is about how my female characters don't read like they're written by a man, which I love. And that's
Hmm.
thanks to her.
Does she
And
look over them and give you input, or how does that work?
yeah, when I read my stuff to her, one of my favorite things is when she says, I don't think that character would say it like that. Or
Hmm.
I don't think that character would say that, but I really like it when she says, I don't think that character would say it like that. And
Okay.
it's usually with women.
Hmm.
And so that is, uh, just plain and simple. She's got a degree in psych, and she has helped me a lot with that. And, so
I
I
think, right, what's helped me the most in that, because my main characters, well, in my series, I have some other things too, are two men. And I think number one, well, I have no brothers, but because I played trombone, I have spent a lot of time sitting with the boys and the men up until I was, well, mid-30s. So my entire life, I've been sitting in the trombone section. So I think that kind of helps me have a little bit of a better feeling maybe than some women would. But also in my writers group, same thing as your wife, where every once in a while I would kind of mess it up. And two of them in particular would just say, no man is ever going to say it like that.
yeah,
And they would give me suggestions, so obviously they still know more than I do, but that is very helpful to get input from other people.
yeah.
So what is next for you?
Well, um, book 6, I'm actually waiting on the government. Um,
In what
it's,
way?
well, this is book 2,
Hmm.
Order of Light, and book 3 is Demon Seed,
Okay.
and book 4 is Rilari, and book 5 is Vengeance Born, and book 6 is Usurper's Might, and I am waiting on my copyright number. It has been months,
Really?
and I
What
called
is the
them.
holdup? Is that through the Library of Congress?
Yeah, and
Okay.
I called them. I think it was a couple of weeks ago, and they blamed it on the government shutdown.
Okay.
And I said, well,
But that's been over for a while.
and I told them I submitted it like 5 months ago, and
Uh-huh.
they said, well, it's the government shutdown. I said, okay, whatever. But so that's, it's ready. Cover art's done, all that. I'm waiting, and when I get the number, then I'll do one more read over the author's proof, and then it'll be out. But I thought it was going to be out in like September.
So you're just stuck waiting.
Yeah. And so I've got that, and then I am working on a book that I thought was going to be a standalone, but I wrote the initial draft when I was in college, and I'm just a better writer. And
so you're rewriting the whole thing?
Well, I'm not rewriting the whole thing, but one of the things that
editing,
it's kind of a cliche is, show don't tell.
Mm-hmm.
There was too much telling, and so
okay.
doing some rewriting to show it, and so it's probably going to be a duology. It's going to be 2 books.
I have to laugh because I wrote a book. I completed it when I was, I think, 23. I thought it was a pretty good book. I still think it's a wonderful story. But after having been in my writers group for, 6, 7 years, I finished reading everything to them. I had published all the books I'd been reading. So I started reading this novel, and I immediately said, okay, the guy who's from Eastern Europe, he sounds like Yoda. I can't. I'll have to look at it again someday, but I'm in that position where, I think it probably was a decent book for when I wrote it, but I realized, wow, I have really come a long way, and I can do a lot to improve this, like listen to Eastern Europeans and not make them sound like Yoda.
Well, one thing, when I wrote it, I was testing myself. I wanted to know if I was writing full time. I'd been laid off, and I wanted to know if I wrote full time, so 8 hours a day, how long would it take me to write a book? And so I decided to just write and get the whole story out and not do research and all that, and just write.
Yep.
And I didn't have a computer at the time, so handwriting it.
Wow.
I wrote it in 3 weeks. And so
how long a book was it? Like how many words?
I don't remember at that initial point. But it now, I can tell you what it is now. But whoops, that's not my touch screen. Now it's 300,000. But it was probably 150.
Okay.
But
that's a lengthy book to write in 3 weeks.
Yeah, 150, maybe 120, but I can't remember. And that's the thing with things being handwritten. Like when I did Paleface, it was handwritten, and then I took it to the college and typed it and went, oh, that's way too long.
Yeah.
But I wrote it in 3 weeks, and I knew that there was stuff I was going to expand because I deliberately didn't do research. I just wanted to get the story down. So I wrote it in 3 weeks, and I knew there was going to be stuff that would be expanded and world building that was going to be embellished and things like that. But there are things that are just so much better now.
Right. Right. Well, I think that as we progress as writers, that could be a trap we could get into, as I've got to rewrite all of this. There's a part of me that doesn't necessarily want to look at some of my earlier writing because I'll probably end up in that space. So where can people find you online?
Well, my website is kilpack.net. Kilpack has 1 L. KILPACK.net, and that's kind of the hub for my dreams. Everything can be gotten to from there. There's links to where you can buy my stuff on every single page. There's links to my social media. There's links to everything, really. All the interviews I've done, all my, whether they're in print or video or podcasts or whatever, they're all there. Calendars that show the progression of things, everything. I try to have everything there because you never know what somebody will key off of and what they like, and I've had people that have said, I saw this and that's why I'm here. And so it's there. And plus I enjoy doing it. So,
Right.
um,
Yeah, it's
so
interesting how people stumble across things and how one thing leads to another. So, as we stumbled across each other on LinkedIn,
LinkedIn again.
and
Yeah.
in fact, I think you sent me a private message saying, I don't know how to introduce myself. That was you, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I think, I can't remember if you sent me an invitation or if you came up as a suggestion,
okay.
but,
Well, either
I,
way, I was just so grateful to have a private message that didn't involve give me money.
well,
That I'll I'll answer anything that's not begging me for money. So uh you can find me at booksandbrews.net, at lauravosica.com, which is where all my books and my links are, and at gabrielshornpress.com, which is our sponsor. And you can see our sheep and chickens and rabbits and Boo Bear, the dog, who is a cross between Yeti and Mount McKinley, as my husband says, at glenmuralfarms.wordpress.com. Someday I have to get someone to take a picture of him when he stands up, puts his paws on my shoulder, and is looking me right in the face. And I'm 5'6", almost 5'7". So this is a pretty big dog. I saw that dog. Yeah. What breed are those? Are they any particular breed?
I don't know what they are in English, but in like in Russian, they're like Ovcharka,
Okay.
Caucasian something, but they're huge. They're like, when they stand up on their hind legs, they're taller than 6 foot.
Wow. I have to see
And
the dog. That
and
might be
they
too big even for me, and I love big dogs.
and they are known to be they're great guard dogs
Mm-hmm.
because they decide that you belong to them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I
So
thought,
they take care of you.
yeah, so with my military trilogy, I thought they would be great war dogs because
Mm-hmm.
one, they're huge, but also they decide that these soldiers are theirs.
I'm going to have to look that dog up. I actually did notice those dogs on your cover, and at first I thought they were Irish Wolfhounds. And my Irish Wolfhound lived to be almost 11. She died just over a year ago. So, I'm past the point where I break down in tears when I see a dog. So I didn't cry when I looked at your cover, but those dogs did jump out at me. So what we have coming up next, I'm actually taking a little bit of a break from Books and Brews Light, which I was recording twice a week, just because I have to get some other things done. But on the full podcast, we have part 2 of Prophets Petrus and Codgel Vermach coming up. Part 1 is already up. And I will also be working on editing the interview we just did with Christiane Scarpino, who talked about surviving a terrorist attack when she was 21 years old. And so that was a very interesting discussion. And we still have Juliet Cutler scheduled for March. And we have Marlene Ratledge for February coming up. So we have a nice list of authors still coming up on the full podcast. And soon enough, I'll get back to Books and Brews Light. So thank you for being on the program. Cheers.